it's virtually entirely red, and one is a bit of yellow, because as we go you'll find some areas you want more sort of orange, and others more red.
You're not going to use vermilion, you're just using the...
No, I feel I need to stick with the pigments I've told you to, but at the very end, so like a leash, I'll put a bit of... So here we want a bit more red here. Dry your brush, spread it out a bit, so you've got plenty of control. Again, you're not putting a line of red in, you're putting a shadow of red, so it's a soft edge, and not too sort of thin and wiry. So needs a little bit more water. Like I said earlier, though you're painting with your nose rubbing up against it, most people are going to see it at a bigger distance, so you'd be surprised how much you can overstate a colour and it works really well at a distance.
Yes, I put like Christ's head's been put up in the apse in our church, and he looks far too pale.
Yeah. That's where actually taking a photograph helps, because when you take a photograph and look at it with size, it's just so you're seeing it from a distance. You can see things straight away. I did that a lot with the mosaics that I was working on, because they were so big I couldn't stand back. Taking a photograph immediately revealed things that were wrong. But try for this. If something's too strong, you can either make it less strong, or you can make something else near it stronger, so that it's sort of a balance, isn't it? So if you find your reds are too strong, you might actually add a bit more green in, so the red and the green balance each other. It's the art of fooling the eye, really. So now I get a pure red and put it into the tear gland, and then we get onto the lips. The tear gland is a bit like a diamond on its side. For the nose, I think we'll put the red and yellow mix on, and then followed up by a smaller, redder mix. So this is a semi-translucent, sort of warmer, orangey red, wider, and we'll follow it up with a stronger red, likewise the bottom there. So you've got a bit of a glowing edge to it, it's not just a hard red line. Let that dry. Now for the lip, if you look at the underside of the jaw, it's amazing how much the upper teeth are. If you look up that way, that's how much the lips are bent. We tend to think of the lips as like the front. We think of the face as a box with the nose and straight, but it's not. It's more like the bow of a ship. And here is really bent. So that means our lip is actually bent a lot more than we tend to think. So instead of putting red everywhere, first of all, make sure you've got this brown everywhere, your shadow, right across. And then we just put the red in the middle. So you get dark, well, black, shadow, red. So already you're creating a bit of a form. So this is like the shape we're after is like a seagull. So you've got your whole lip outline like that. What we're doing is just a shape like that in the middle. So basically it's leaving that dark. I'll show you what I mean. You'll have to experiment with how red to make it. So make your crescent in the middle, and this little tail at the end. Little red there, little crescent, and then just a little tail there, leaving the outside as a shadow. Just leave that for a while and go back to it, and then use the less red at the bottom, and it's just one side, isn't it? It's a really light touch, it's more like a an orange, you can put a touch of white in if you wanted, but we'll see how it goes just with yellow. That's just one side. You want to have a gate open on the left. From the edge of it. While that's dry, I'm going to make a little bit of red and black line down the middle where the lips meet. Make it a bit more defined. That's a little bit more black. It's a little bit strong there, so instead of making that less, I'm going to make that stronger. So that's how we're doing falling the eye. This is more the pure red, just to emphasise the depth of that shadow there. And there's a stronger red here, so let's do that. So basically, this is like a balancing act. This is the final stage where you're looking at the whole and fine-tuning things, so no one thing stands out more than you want it to. Or on the other hand, you emphasise something to make it stand out, especially if it's small, like an ear in this case. You can beef it up more, like a small dog that barks loudly to compensate for its diminutive size. So now I'm going to put the pure red in down the side of the nose to strengthen that a little bit, leaving the slightly translucent orangey red sticking out the side of it. Make sure you've got a little bit of a swell in the middle of the nose. It's not entirely straight. That's a little bit too strong, that red there still, so I'm going to just mix up some yellow and whiteness. Tease it over a little bit. A little bit down here, so this sort of. And then before you make a final decision about whether or not it looks good, just leave it to settle for an hour, 2 or 3. These things will become less saturated as all the water is evaporated off. What we also do, partially for aesthetic, partially for practical reasons, is when we think it's all finished, you give it a glaze of egg and water. That does 2 things. It evens up the absorbency of everything, so when you come to varnish a year later, you don't come across really absorbent and then really non-absorbent areas. But secondly, it saturates the pigment, because some pigments, when they're saturated with water, they're quite dark, like raw umber. If you do raw umber, it's really quite dark when it's wet, but you find the next day, when the water's evaporated, it's become a lot lighter. So if you leave it like that until a year later when you varnish, you'll get a real shock. All of a sudden it's too late to put the varnish on. It's really dark. So by putting egg glaze on, you know what it's going to look like when it's varnished. It sort of permanently saturates it.